7 years of marriage ruined in 7 minutes of video. That's exactly how long it took me to watch footage of my wife, Jessica, in another man's arms, captured by the security camera in my own car. A technology I installed to protect my BMW ended up revealing a lot more than a possible scratch or dent. It revealed the true face of the person who slept by my side every night. Cheating hits you like a punch in the stomach. You lose your breath, you get disoriented, and it takes a while to process what happened. And when it's mixed with elaborate lies, looked you right in the eyes, then the pain turns into something different, something cold, something that changes you forever. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to access more stories like this. Jessica and I met in college. She was studying psychology while I was finishing up my business degree. We got married right after graduation and built a life together. She started her own practice, and I joined a consulting firm that had me traveling all the time. Trust is better than control. That's what we always told each other. When I started taking longer trips, some friends hinted that I should keep an eye on my wife. I thought that was offensive. Jessica and I had a pact of honesty. Daily phone calls, sweet messages, video chats before bed. The physical distance never really seemed like a real problem for us. My job required me to be away 3 or 4 days a week. Sometimes, like on the last trip before everything fell apart, I'd even spend a whole week in another state. Jessica always supported me. She said that my success was her success too, that we were a team, and I truly believed that. I had just returned from a week in Chicago. It was an important project that could have landed me a promotion. Throughout the trip, I kept in touch with Jessica like always. On Wednesday night, we video called while she was lying in our bed, saying she was exhausted after a day full of patients, but happy to see me, even if it was just through the screen. The morning after I got back, I had to use my car for a local meeting. Something weird happened when I started the engine, a noise that wasn't there before. What got my attention was that I'd taken the BMW in for a full service just 2 days before my trip. "Jessica, did you use my car while I was away?" I asked casually while we were having coffee. She hesitated for a second. A whole second that, at the time, didn't seem to mean anything. "Yes, I used it on Thursday night. My car was in the shop, remember? I went to visit Diane. She's going through a tough divorce right now." I just nodded. Diane was an old friend of hers. It made sense, even though Jessica usually preferred ride-sharing services when her own car wasn't available. The noise in the engine got worse as I drove to my office. I decided to take the car straight to the shop after work. Tyler, the mechanic who had been taking care of my BMW for years, checked it out and frowned. "Mike, this is odd. There are signs of heavy use here. The car has clocked more than 300 kilometers since the last servicing just a few days ago. And this noise? It sounds like someone was really stressing the gears." I explained that my wife had only used the car to visit a friend, which wouldn't account for all those extra kilometers. Tyler gave me a strange look, as if he was trying to decide whether to say something. Finally, he said, "Look, I don't mean to get into your business, but you installed that security camera I recommended, right? The one that automatically records whenever it detects movement inside or around the vehicle?" I nodded. It was a discreet system I had installed 6 months earlier after a wave of burglaries hit our neighborhood. "Maybe you should check out the recordings. The system stores about 2 weeks of footage before it starts overwriting them." Something in the way he said that sent chills down my spine. Back at home, with Jessica at work, I connected my laptop to the camera system. I scrolled through the recordings until I reached Wednesday night, the same night I had video called Jessica while she was supposedly in our bed. The first recording started at 9:43 p.m. Jessica got into the car wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. She was made up, and her hair was done. A far cry from the exhausted after a long day look she had shown me on the video call. The next recording showed Jessica and 2 friends leaving a club at 11:17 p.m. They were laughing out loud, clearly having a great time. Neither of them was Diane. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself that maybe Jessica just wanted to have some fun and didn't want to worry me during my important trip. Then came the third recording, at 1:22 a.m. Jessica pulled the car over into a parking lot at a different bar. 15 minutes later, another recording. She returned to the car, accompanied by a man. They talked briefly and then he kissed her. And it wasn't just a casual kiss. I saw my wife run her fingers through his hair, pulling him closer while leaning against my car. The final recording in that sequence showed the 2 of them getting into the car, with Jessica driving away. The GPS log indicated the destination, a hotel 150 kilometers from our home. And to make matters worse, the video's timestamp showed that everything happened exactly 1 hour after we ended our video call, during which she was supposedly going to sleep in our bed. For the hours that followed, I was paralyzed by those images. I watched the videos over and over again, as if each new viewing might somehow change what was recorded there. As if at some point I'd realize it was all a terrible mistake. But the reality was right there, unyielding and crystal clear. My wife, our marriage, our life together. It was all a sham. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of that trance. Jessica got home from work around 6 in the evening, calling my name like she did every day. Her voice sounded just as it always did. Warm, loving, familiar. How could she do that? How could she look at me, kiss me, say she missed me, while at the same time living a completely different life behind my back? "Michael, are you home?" she called again, leaving the keys on the entryway console. I heard her footsteps coming toward my office. "I'm here," I replied, my voice lower than I intended. Jessica appeared in the doorway with a smile that instantly faded when she saw my expression. The laptop, still open, showed a frozen frame of the video. Her and the stranger kissing, leaning against the car. "What is this?" she asked, even though her wide eyes already told me she knew exactly what was up. "You tell me, because it looks like my wife, the same one who told me she was exhausted and going to sleep on Wednesday, was really out partying, and then in a hotel with another man. In my car." Jessica stayed still for a few seconds, as if weighing her options. I saw the exact moment she switched to a defensive stance, her shoulders tensing, her posture shifting subtly. I can explain." "Please, explain," I interrupted, gesturing toward the chair in front of me. "Explain why you lied about being home when we talked. Explain why you made up the story about visiting Diane. Explain why you decided to use my car to go to a hotel with another man." Jessica sat down slowly, her eyes now welling up. "It was a mistake, Michael. A terrible mistake. I went out with the girls to blow off some steam. I've been so overwhelmed lately. With the practice, the house, everything. I just wanted a night for myself. And the man. Was that also a night for you?" She ran her hands over her face, letting tears roll down her cheeks. "I met him that night. I drank too much. Way more than I should have. I don't even really remember how it all went down. The girls left and he offered some company. It was just a one-night mistake, that's all." "A mistake?" I repeated incredulously. "Jessica, you didn't just mess up like forgetting to pay a bill. You planned this. You got ready, went out secretly, lied while looking me in the eyes on video, and then drove 150 kilometers to a hotel with a complete stranger. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking straight. Drunk enough to go to a hotel but sober enough to drive 150 kilometers? That doesn't add up." Her expression changed, a spark of anger replacing the performative remorse for a moment. "Whatever you want me to say, Michael? That I made a mistake? I'm telling you, I did. You want me to beg for forgiveness? I'm begging. It was a stupid night that meant nothing. And what about the other nights?" She froze. "What other nights?" That's exactly what I'm wondering. If I hadn't installed that camera, I would have never known about Wednesday. How many other nights were there during our trips? How many times did you wait for me to get on the plane so you could live your parallel life? "There were no other nights," she insisted, though her voice trembled slightly. "I swear, Michael, it was the first and only time." I shook my head, unable to believe any word coming out of her mouth. "What scares me the most, Jessica, isn't even the cheating itself. It's how easily you lied, how naturally you came up with stories, made up excuses. How can I believe anything you say now? Because I'm being honest. I know I messed up, but everyone makes mistakes. 7 years of marriage, Michael. 7 years. You're just going to throw it all away over one slip-up? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did when you chose to lie and cheat. And you know what's worse? If it weren't for the camera, you would have continued living like nothing happened. Looking me in the eyes every day. Sleeping in the same bed. Saying you love me." Jessica abruptly got up and started pacing around the room. "It's not fair. You are gone for entire weeks. Do you have any idea how hard it is? You have your coworkers, your trips, your crazy busy life. And me? I'm here alone, waiting for you to come back only for you to leave again. So it's my fault? I'm working to build a future for us. A future where we're not together? What kind of marriage is that? When was the last time we really talked, Michael? When was the last time we did something together besides watching a movie on the couch until you fell asleep?" For a moment, her words hit a sensitive spot. It was true that my work consumed a lot of my time, but I always thought we understood each other. I thought we were on the same page. If you were unhappy, why didn't you talk to me? Why choose to cheat instead of talking? I tried to talk. You never really listen. You're always focused on the next project, the next meeting. I shook my head, refusing to accept that shifting of blame. No, Jessica. Don't put all that on me. You had choices. You could have insisted we talk. You could have suggested couples therapy. You could have done a dozen other things. But you chose to lie and cheat. Silence filled the room for several long moments. Finally, Jessica sat back down, looking exhausted. What now? She asked softly. I don't know. I need time to think, to process all of this. But one thing's for sure. Nothing will ever be the same. The week that followed was a blur of sleepless nights and days on autopilot. Jessica moved temporarily to her sister's house, a mutual decision to give us some space. At work, no one noticed anything was off. I became a pro at keeping up appearances, answering emails, attending meetings, and giving presentations as if my personal life wasn't falling apart. In the few hours I managed to sleep, I'd dream about those videos. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, replaying every detail, every moment of that night in my head. The image of Jessica in another man's arms had become a permanent scar in my mind. We talked on the phone a few times that week. Painful conversations filled with accusations, tears, and promises. Jessica swore we could get past this, that she was willing to go to therapy to earn back my trust. She talked about couples who had overcome infidelity and come out stronger. She asked if 7 years of history were really going to be thrown away over a mistaken judgment. On the 7th day after discovering everything, I arranged to meet her at a neutral cafe, somewhere away from our home and from the memories every room now held. Jessica arrived first. I noticed she had dressed carefully, wearing the blue dress I'd given her for her birthday. Her hair was impeccable, and her makeup was subtle, a conscious effort to remind me of the woman I fell in love with. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat down. Her hands were trembling slightly as she held her coffee cup. How are you? Surviving, I replied honestly. And you? Terrible. I can't sleep, I can barely eat. Michael, I miss you so much. Our home feels empty without you. It's your home that's empty, Jessica. I'm still here. She looked down. You know what I mean. I took a deep breath, gathering the courage to say what I needed to. I spent the whole week thinking about us, about what happened, trying to figure out if there's any way forward. Her face lit up with hope, and it hurt to see it fade. Jessica, I can't trust you anymore. And without trust, there's no relationship. We can rebuild that trust. Other people did it, so why can't we? Because every time I look at you, I see two people. The wife I loved for 7 years, and the woman in the video who lied right to my face. And I can't tell which one is real anymore. The woman in the video isn't me. It was a moment of weakness, a mistake that will never happen again. The problem is, I only found out about this mistake by accident. If it weren't for the camera, you would have kept lying. And that makes me question everything. How many other mistakes happened that I never knew about? How can I know you're telling the truth now? Jessica tried to reach over and grab my hand on the table, but I instinctively pulled away. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if that little gesture confirmed what I already knew. I want a divorce, Jessica. She didn't seem surprised, just devastated. A tear ran down her cheek as she slowly nodded. Isn't there anything I can do or say to change your mind? It's not about what you can say anymore. It's about what's already been done and said. The lies happened, the cheating happened. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. We sat in silence for several long moments, the weight of those words hanging between us like a physical presence. Finally, I placed an envelope on the table. What's this? She asked. 2 possible routes for our divorce. The first is friendly, discreet, and quick. We split our assets according to our prenuptial agreement. No contests, no drama. The second, I hesitated, hating myself a little for what I was about to say. The second involves using the camera recordings as evidence of infidelity, which, according to our prenup, would significantly change the division of assets. Her eyes widened. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you options, just like you had your choices that night. Jessica took the envelope with trembling fingers. I never thought you could be so cruel. I never thought you could be unfaithful. Looks like we didn't know each other as well as we thought. She studied the documents for a few minutes, silent tears falling onto the paper. Finally, she looked up, her eyes hard and distant. I choose the first option. I just want this to be over as quickly as possible. Great. My lawyer will get in touch to finalize the details. In the meantime, I'm moving to a hotel for a few weeks, so you can pack your things and find a new place. That's not necessary, she said, drying her tears with renewed determination. I can stay with my sister until I find an apartment. Our home, Our home has always been more yours than mine anyway. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat that made it hard to speak. That house had been our first big investment together, carefully chosen after months of searching. Now, it just felt like an empty vessel of shattered dreams. Can I get my things this weekend? Can you not be there when I do? Of course, I replied, realizing that would be our last agreement as a couple. Jessica got up, slung her bag over her shoulder, and looked at me one last time. For a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with in college. Vulnerable, intense, genuine. Then, that image faded, replaced by the memory of the videos. Goodbye, Michael. I hope one day you can forgive me. Goodbye, Jessica. I watched her leave the cafe, her steps growing firmer with every meter as she walked away from me. I didn't feel the relief I expected from that final decision, only an enormous emptiness and the certainty that a part of my life had ended irrevocably. 3 months passed since we signed the divorce papers. The process was surprisingly quick and civilized, maybe because we both just wanted to turn the page. Jessica kept her word and didn't contest a thing, accepting the terms of our prenuptial agreement without argument. Our mutual friends were shocked by the sudden split. Some even tried to mediate a reconciliation, not knowing the real details behind our breakup. I chose discretion. I only said that I had discovered an affair, without mentioning the videos or the more painful details. The house we shared for so long became a strange space after Jessica left. The rooms felt larger and quieter. In the first few days, I found traces of her everywhere. A hair clip left in the bathroom, a brush in the dresser drawer, the lingering scent of her perfume on the pillows. Every little reminder felt like reopening a wound. I threw myself into work like never before. I accepted every project available, even those that required even longer trips. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very trips that supposedly had created a rift in our marriage were now becoming my refuge. In anonymous hotel rooms, I didn't have to face the ghosts that haunted my home. My boss noticed my sudden dedication and offered me a promotion to regional manager, a position I had been eyeing for years. I accepted immediately, without considering that the new responsibilities would practically consume all my time. After all, there was no one waiting for me at home anymore. Nights were the toughest. After spending all my energy at work, I'd get home exhausted and yet unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the videos, imagining alternate scenarios, wondering if there were signs I had missed. I began doubting not only Jessica, but also my own judgment. If I could be so wrong about the person closest to me, what else could be off? Friends tried introducing me to new people, setting up dates, and urging me to get back in the game. I went on a few dinners and exchanged messages with women who, in another time in my life, would have caught my interest. But something inside me was broken. The idea of trusting someone again wasn't just scary, it felt almost impossible. You need to give it time, my friend David kept saying. No one gets over a 7-year marriage in just a few months. Maybe he was right, but time only seemed to cement my mistrust instead of healing it. I started noticing how easy it is for people to lie in everyday situations. Little white lies, convenient omissions, and edited versions of the truth. The whole world suddenly seemed built on the fragile foundation of half-truths. On one of the rare occasions I went out to socialize, I ran into Tyler, the mechanic who inadvertently triggered the whole revelation. We were in a sports bar watching a basketball game when he finally brought it up. "How are you handling everything, Mike? I heard about the divorce." I shrugged and kept my eyes glued to the TV to avoid eye contact. "I'm moving on. You know, sometimes I feel guilty for mentioning that camera. If I had just kept quiet." "No," I interrupted firmly. "You did the right thing. I'd rather know the truth, no matter how much it hurts, than live in a comfortable lie." Tyler nodded, looking relieved. Some people would rather not know. That phrase kept echoing in my mind for days. Would I really rather not know? Live in a bubble of ignorance, believing in a perfect marriage that never existed? The answer always came back as no. The truth, however painful, was better than the illusion, even if that truth cost me my ability to trust. 6 months after the separation, I got an unexpected message from Jessica. It was her birthday, a day we had celebrated together for 8 consecutive years, including our dating years. The message was simple. "I still think about you every day. I miss you. If one day you can forgive me, I'm here." I stared at those words for hours, feeling a storm of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to reply and say that I missed her too. Not the Jessica who cheated, but the Jessica I thought I knew all those years. Yet another part of me was angry at being so vulnerable, reminded of the lies and how easily she led a double life. I didn't reply. The following week, During therapy that I finally started attending at my brother's insistence, I mentioned the message. "And how did you feel when you got it?" the therapist asked. "Confused, irritated, sad. A bit of everything, really." "Did you consider replying?" "Briefly. But what could I say? I miss you too, but I'll never be able to trust you again." "How would that help either of us?" The therapist nodded thoughtfully. "You mentioned trust several times. Do you think you'll ever be able to trust someone again?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. The same question I ask myself every night. I don't know. Part of me wants to believe that, eventually, this wound will heal. Another part fears that this mistrust is permanent, a mark left on me by the divorce. The fear is understandable. But remember, Jessica's betrayal says more about her than it does about relationships in general. There are people out there capable of honesty and commitment. How can I know who those people are? I swear I thought Jessica was one of them. The therapist smiled gently. You can never be 100% sure. Trust always involves risk. The question is it worth living a life where you never take that risk? That session ended without definitive answers. Only more questions to mull over. But for the first time since the separation, I began to consider that my life wasn't over. It was just changing direction. Work continued to fill my days, but slowly I started making room for other things. I took up running again, a hobby I'd abandoned during the closing years of our marriage. I began visiting my parents more often, reconnecting with my family in a way I had neglected. Small steps, slow but steady, toward a new version of who I am. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to access more stories like this. Today marks exactly 1 year since I discovered the cheating through that security camera. A year since my life took a completely different turn from what I had planned. I'm sitting in the same office where I watched those recordings, reflecting on everything that's changed and everything that has stayed the same. The divorce was finalized 8 months ago. Jessica moved to another state after accepting a job at a renowned clinic. From what I've heard through mutual friends, she seems to be moving on with her life. Part of me sincerely hopes she's okay, despite everything. The resentment, though it still flares up on some days, doesn't burn as intensely anymore. As for me, I'm still working at the same company, now as a regional director. Another promotion that came with my nearly obsessive dedication to work. Recently, though, I've started setting healthier boundaries between work and personal life. I realized that using work as an escape wasn't sustainable in the long run. The house we once shared was finally sold 3 months ago. It was a tough decision, but a necessary one. Every corner of that place held memories, some good, others now tainted by doubt. I moved into a smaller apartment closer to downtown, a space that's all mine, free from the ghosts of the past. Weekly therapy is still a constant in my routine. Slowly, I'm learning to process the trauma of the betrayal without letting it define who I am or how I relate to others. It's a long, non-linear journey. There are days of progress and days of setbacks, just like any healing process. As for trust, well, that remains the hardest part. I've been on a few dates over the last few months. I've met some interesting people, some with the potential for something more meaningful. But whenever a connection starts to get deep, that familiar sense of alertness hits me, the fear of being cheated on again. My therapist says that it's normal, that mistrust is a natural defense mechanism after betrayal. The key, she says, isn't to completely erase that fear, but to learn not to let it control my decisions. I'm trying. Recently, I started talking with a woman I met at a company charity event. Claire is an architect, divorced for 3 years, and surprisingly easy to talk to. She knows my story. I told her about the divorce on our second date without going into the painful details. We all carry scars, she said simply. The important thing is not to let them stop us from living. I don't know where this connection will lead, whether it turns into something deeper or stays just a friendship. What I do know is that for the first time in a year, I'm open to the possibility. It's a small step, but it means a lot. Looking back to that fateful day when I decided to review the security camera footage, I often wonder, if I could go back in time, would I do it differently? Would I choose ignorance over the painful truth? The answer is still no. As hard as it was to face the reality of my marriage, I'd rather live authentically, even if it means enduring moments of intense pain. The truth always finds a way to come out, even when we try to hide it or ignore it. In my case, it came through a camera installed to protect a material asset, which ended up revealing something far more valuable, the reality of my relationship. If you've ever been cheated on, you probably know that feeling of the ground being ripped from beneath your feet. It makes you question not just your relationship, but your own ability to judge. If you're going through this now, I can tell you one thing. Time may not heal every wound, as they say, but it teaches you how to live with them. The pain slowly turns into something else. Maybe wisdom, maybe caution, maybe just a deeper understanding of how fragile we are. Sometimes I wonder what you all would do in my place. Would you give a second chance? Would you confront things differently? Would you choose reconciliation over separation? There's no one right answer for these questions. Every relationship is unique. Every betrayal has its own context, and every person has their limits. What I know for sure is that, no matter which path you choose, honesty, both with yourself and with others, is fundamental. A year later, I still don't have all the answers. Maybe I never will. But I'm learning to live with the questions, to navigate a world where trust is both essential and risky. And maybe that is the real growth. Not finding a way back to who I was, but discovering who I can become afterward. Life rarely follows the script we write for it. Sometimes a simple security camera can completely change your trajectory. What matters, I believe, isn't so much what happens to us, but how we choose to respond. And I choose to move forward. Cautious, yes, but still open to the possibilities the future holds. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to access more stories like this.